I'm a Georgist, and it's a strange...
When you say Georgist, I've heard you say that a lot. What does that mean?
It's a strange economic belief, which means that the principal sort of form of taxation should be on the value of unimproved land.
Fucking hell. How did you get to that?
The point being that the insight of Henry George is that when you have an activity that depends for its performance on its location, okay, most of the economic gains don't end up going to the person who performs the work. They go to the person who owns the land. Okay, so an extreme case would be when you buy a pair of... Why is Heathrow Terminal 5 full of luxury goods? Okay, well, it's partly they're there for advertising purposes, not to sell. But the main beneficiary of those extraordinarily high margins actually is the owner of the real estate, the airport, not the person in the shop or the owner of the brand.
Yeah.
And so you can escape that thanks to the car, by the way, not just the internet, by going and buying undervalued land and making it a destination. Now,
Mr. Village.
Henry George would say you should actually tax what is extractive income. In other words, income extracted by owning the land. You remember when people said after COVID, you must come into London to bail out Pret and Costa coffee. And my argument was, you're not actually bailing out Pret and Costa coffee, you're bailing out the Duke of Westminster, who owns the land on which those shops reside. Okay, and you now have a situation in London where the combination of rates and rent effectively mean that you're not really paying for the food anymore, you're paying for the location. And so the clever thing to do, what you might call, you know, the solution is to avoid the depredation. So someone from a very, very good Indian restaurant opened a place called the Pret. There's now one in Canterbury, one in Rye, but they first opened in Margate. And what they did is they couldn't afford to open in London. They had the culinary talent, but they didn't have the capital. And probably, do you necessarily want to run an Indian restaurant where it costs £70 and half your money goes straight out of the door to the landlord? Okay. And so they took over what was effectively a derelict pub in Margate with parking, created a great Indian restaurant. It's a great destination. People drive there. They don't charge as much as in London, but they get to keep more of the money.
That's what you said, the word destination. Destination.
It's the language of the Michelin Guide, which is vol le voyage, you see.
Yes.
You have these various things, I think it was 1 star, 2 star. There's vol le détour, which is worth going out of your way for. Yeah. And there's, I think it's vol le visite, which is, if you're there, this is worth going to. There's vol le détour, which is worth going out of your way for. And then there's vol le voyage, which is a destination in its own right.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you can become vol le voyage, I don't mean you have to have 3 Michelin stars, but a place where people are actually happy to go, let's get in the car and go there. You can make a lot of money because, as I said, you know, what you're paying in rent and rates is the same as the shitty pub, you know, 5 miles down the road, but you've now got people flooding to you.
Yeah.
And so this is my argument that actually London is pricing itself out of being interesting. And I think we saw that before with West London versus East London, okay? West London became so expensive. I have a very interesting axis, which I call the skanky wanky axis.
Right.
Which is, if an area is exclusively poor, it becomes a bit too skanky. But if an area becomes too rich, it becomes wanky.
Yeah.
And where you want to be is a place where there's a mixture of, you know, there's genuine gradations of wealth. Okay?
Islington is the example of that.
You might argue, yeah.
Skanky and wanky. The amalgamation of skanky and wanky.
Skanky and wanky. And so I think there's something interesting there, which is that actually, you know, I'm now, you know, I look forward to a trip out of London on culinary grounds, you know, that I'm going to discover more interesting stuff and actually more easily. Obviously, there's hugely interesting stuff in London if you want to be massively ripped off, okay? But I actually feel my heart race more, you know, with a trip down to Margate in terms of what I'll get.
Oh, there's an adventure.
Curve coffee roasters.
Yeah, adventure.
There's Broadstairs has a few utterly fantastic restaurants. Deal, utterly sensational. And the other interesting thing is that if you do well in Kent, you earn repeat custom. I would argue that Londoners are now so sated with choice, if they're always wanting to try something new. Okay?
Well, and also you won't get
The really valuable feedback for a restaurant is, do people come back? That's the only thing that really matters in terms of a measure. It's why actually, you know, And I always ask this weird question, which is if you ask people, what's the most amazing meal you've had in your life? And they answer, and they typically name some restaurant in Copenhagen or Madrid or whatever. And then you ask the question, how often have you eaten there? The answer is always once.
Yeah.
Well, that's, in a weird way, that's not a great restaurant, is it? I mean, measured by my form of, it's rather like those technologies, like Apple Vision Pro, which may well be a really expensive technology, which everybody tries and goes, that's amazing, but then mysteriously it ends up in the back cupboard, after 3 months.
100%.
Espressos is sponsored by supply chain software gurus Unleashed. It talks to your e-com and accounting software. It's helped islands cut admin time in half, get granular clarity on your margins, know where your stock is. Don't miss availability. Brands like Candy Kittens, Tiny Rebel, and Trip all use Unleashed, and so should you.